Lear preambles the importance of his division of his kingdoms to his daughters and is straightforward in his agenda. He accepts that his days are numbered. He also acknowledges that their husbands, as well as the two other suitors whom have not yet made a formal inquiry to marriage on Cordelia's behalf, are also included in the panel. Goneril's claim to persuade the king has been atoned in the context of not showing favor to the intangible things in life that we may take for granted, such as our ability to see, hear, and speak, are no match for the love and devotion she had shown for her father. Cordelia interrupts briefly, indicating throughout the panel of the three that she may not get a fair shake, simply for being the youngest daughter. As Goneril concludes, Lear awards her with a specific spot on the map, as well as her husband, the Duke of Albany, to receive the same with no stipulation. Regan presents her worthiness of estate by indicating her will for overcoming difficulties and adversities makes her ideal for the most, and that her oldest sister carbon copied her traits of the way love is to be shown, and therefore compels Goneril's posture of looking up to something that has not yet been obtained. Regan closes her argument indicating that she has demonstrated the abilities of living a pure life of love to her father, in quote, within the most precious square of sense. This metaphor would paint the picture that even in the most vigorous of circumstances one would experience in an intimate relationship, Regan's approach to love was executed with sincere discipline, and its validity was exhausted and carefully nursed to not overstep its boundary of precept. To Regan's request, Lear does not rebuttal and awards her with a specific measure of the kingdom. Cordelia still continues to interject, insisting her love for her father outweighs those of her sisters, at which point Lear invites her to speak with no rebuke. Cordelia refuses to speak in an attempt to irritate and test the patience of Lear. Her attitude of entitlement eventually bends when she provides a simple yet hasty response that mocks her sisters for being married and shows lack of diplomatic maturity of what the overall demands that pertain to the situation are asking her for. Upset with her response, Lear becomes furious with her lack of concern and appreciation and calls her bluff for playing the victim and claims her inability to speak for having a heavy heart was a scapegoat. It's important to note that literary scholars theorize that certain writings of Shakespeare could have been biblically inspired. According to Chris Carpenter, author of How the Bible Influenced William Shakespeare, the Geneva Bible was his accepted text, because the King James was still coming out. Was he a Christian man, as we would define it today? It's up for debate, but I would say probably not. But he lived his life from a Christian worldview, no doubt about it. Article access date, August 10th, 2024. Article dated December 10th, 2022. The Book of Esther is a unique example of how courtship would be handled amongst similar circumstances when the delegation of power and authority are at hand. Still in a furious state, Lear orders Cordelia to leave his sight and immediately orders the process of handing down the kingdoms to Goneril, Regan, and their husbands, being the immediate beneficiaries. The Earl of Kent notices that the king is carrying out a large decision out of clouded judgment and insists that he reconsiders the transaction until he calms down. Lear, to an extent, knows he is in an upset state, but urges Kent to step away before the boiling pot overflows. He urges him to stay quiet before he enforces a severe punishment, but still, Kent continues to object to the king's present state of mind. Knowing that Kent has stepped into the crossfire, he acknowledges his fault of overstepping his authority and informs that only having him banished or killed would only make matters worse. He attempts to persuade Lear that Cordelia didn't mean what she said and it wasn't worth losing his anger over because in the end, individuals who resemble an attitude of Cordelia's bear no platform because their ignorance will only defile them in the end. Kent further supports his motive of objecting to the transaction, stating that he doesn't intend to indict himself for being the hero and de-escalating the matter, and indirectly tells the audience that he knows what battles to fight and which ones to avoid. Kent strategically plays the devil's advocate when attempting to earn the king's attention, as it potentially even saved his life. Moreover, he exits knowing that he's acted out of integrity and dividends a sound conscience because of it. The king banishes the Earl of Kent with a 10-day soft exit period to leave the kingdom and threatens to have him killed if he is found near the kingdom after the 10th day. As Kent exits Lear's presence shortly after Cordelia, he offers his regards to Goneril and Regan, wishing that their efforts to comply with Lear's assets and estate distribution turns out in their favor. The distribution of kingdoms continues as Lear now asks for Burgundy and France, the two suitors whom were competing to wed Cordelia. Burgundy is called first, but does not express the slightest of boldness. On the contrary, he is speechless, and only asks that he remain in Lear's good graces. Lear encourages Burgundy not to overthink his proposition, as he is now attempting to deplete Cordelia's value as a spouse, and provides him with a take it or leave it decision. He adds that it would be in his best interest if he were to move on. Meanwhile, Burgundy insists that Lear has him cornered, and finds himself unable to make a decision like this on his feet. France is also beginning to process what he had witnessed, and frames the conclusion that he can't help but feel distraught that Cordelia would throw so many good opportunities away. Cordelia continues to add more fuel to the fire by accusing Lear for being a hypocrite, for only desiring to hear the words of soothsayers and those who want to sound impressive with their speech. She then appeals her remarks, indicating that Lear only cares about superficial actions and claims that choosing to disown her for not buying into this lifestyle was a problem of his, and she isn't concerned about losing any sleep over his decision to distance her out of his life. The conversation now channels back to France and Burgundy's playoff as they continue to duel their hand for Cordelia. Because the two remain neutral in their initial plea, France puts the pressure on Burgundy, indicating that his panel was too conservative and the window to persuade the king for his blessing was starting to close. France attempts to alter Burgundy's decision, indicating that being married to someone who walks a different path that parallels that one which she lives, her natural reality, which still carries desirable merit despite everyone being in a vulnerable position, bears uncomfortable consequences and is destined for destruction. Therefore, he encourages Burgundy to consider the king's previous view that marrying someone whom the king stigmas as one with little esteem is a valid referral. Burgundy adds no more supporting detail to his argument, as he believes he has no dog in the fight and simply asks for her hand in marriage, and the king rejects his request. France expresses his sincerity in marriage, indicating that despite having a reputation of being strongly desired while being hated by her family was an unfair discount, and while the opportunity seemed to present itself in an estranged manner that he also believes was premeditated by their higher power, was still worth pursuing. The king offers France's blessing, and both agree to marriage. Cordelia addresses the king, her sisters, and their husbands that it's unfortunate that the next chapter of their lives would show everyone's true colors and toxic feelings towards each other. Regan shows no empathy and begs her not to patronize them. Gonril wishes her younger sister a good marriage, even though she lacks the maturity of it being so, but both treaty and hope for the best. Gonril decides to be the bigger person and exhibits damage control by explaining to Regan that much more could have been said. Gonril and Regan both agree that their father acted in a stubborn manner, but given his age, it was not an uncommon occurrence to show shrewd behavior, and both that he and Cordelia just happened to be set in their ways, as both held strong opposing opinions. At this point, Gonril and Regan attempt to find harmony in their exit, as Regan claims that all could have possibly been prevented hadn't Kent pushed Lear over the edge. Gonril and Regan conclude the scene, indicating that although there was some good to have come out of everyone's heated exchanges, their inheritance still bears a cavity, and desire to work together to ensure that they do not bear the repercussions of Cordelia's send-off.